So perspective drawing is a way of using drawing in drawing in perspective is a way of making drawings that have depth. You have a two-dimensional surface and you're making it into a three-dimensional surface, some three-dimensional space that you can feel like you enter. And what I'm focusing on is linear perspective. So the basic perspective drawing that you tend to draw when you're in high school or junior high even is this simple 1 point perspective. You have a horizon. You can see that there. You make a vanishing point, and from that vanishing point, you make a road. Like that. There's your road. And then maybe I can do something like making something you see a lot is making telephone poles or something like that, or trees that are all going to follow this path. So this is usually something we would start with. A road, make these telephone poles. I could stick some telephone wires in here. There we have it. It has a sense of space. It's a two-dimensional plane that we have created a space that we can go into. Everything gets smaller as it goes away, and everything converges on this point. So the main ideas of perspective drawing are here, but there are some things wrong with this. There are reasons that I wouldn't start this way. So the important things that we have here are the horizon. Perspective drawings, it is very important to know where your horizon is and how the level of your eye affects that horizon. So that horizon is always at high level, at eye level. So if I move up, if I stand up, then this horizon will move up. If I sit down, the horizon will move down, and it will change the way everything looks based on that. So that horizon is important. And then here we have a vanishing point, that point right there. Vanishing point. So for simplicity's sake, this is a perspective drawing. Sure, you have everything going to a vanishing point. The vanishing point is the point that parallel lines meet at. And that point almost always is on the horizon. And this is called 1 point perspective. Now, 1 point perspective isn't real. It's not something that exists in reality. When you go out and you look, if you look down a street, there is always more than 1 point. There's always more than one vanishing point. This is simple, but it's a little bit wrong. So there's always going to be another vanishing point off the page that way and a vanishing point off the page this way. Generally, there will also be a vanishing point that is down below my page and up above my page, but we're not going to worry about those. So what we are going to start with in this class is 2 point perspective. We're not going to mess with any of this 1 point perspective. There is a time and place for it, and we are not going to be using it. It looks somewhat correct. It looks all right. You might really like the way it comes out, but your drawing will always look and feel better if you understand that there is more than one vanishing point. So, let's look at 2-point perspective. As always, we are going to start with a horizon. The way that horizon works is if I am standing on the ground looking at some buildings, then that horizon that's in the distance is going to be about, for me, about 5 feet above the ground, because that's how high my eyes are. If I lay down on the ground, then that horizon is going to be on the ground. I'm not going to see any of the road. If I'm standing on the 10th floor, then the horizon on the buildings around me is going to cross those buildings at the 10th floor. So how high or low this is depends on where you are standing. If I put this up here and I draw everything below the horizon, that means that everything I'm looking at, I'm looking down at it. If I have my horizon down here and I draw everything above the horizon, that means I'm looking up. I'm going to put it pretty close to the middle. So there's my horizon. And I'm going to have 2 vanishing points because this is 2-point perspective. I'll put a point right here. I'm going to get them really close to the edge of my page, and a point right here. And what I'm going to start out with is a simple cube shape. That's it. To do that, I'm going to start out by making a cube that's here at the below my horizon. I'm going to make some lines, and I'm making these a little bit darker than I would need to, and darker than you should. They should be just dark enough that you can see. I need to make them a little bit darker because I need them to be visible on the camera. So I'm drawing 2 lines from each vanishing point. And that gets me this triangle in the middle. That triangle is going to be the top of my cube. So because the cube is below the horizon, that means I'm looking down on it, and that means I can see the top. From there, I'm going to bring from this corner here, which is closest to me. So I can see this kind of as like a tabletop. If this is a tabletop, this corner is farther away from me. This corner is closest to me. From that closest corner, I'm going to bring a line straight down, however far I want. It doesn't matter. And then from that bottom edge, come back up to my vanishing points. All right, now it's starting to look cube-like. I'm starting to see it. So now I'm just going to come from these 2 points here, these other 2 corners, and bring a line straight down. Now for 2-point perspective drawing, all of my lines are going to be straight up and down or going to a vanishing point. If I find that I'm making a line that goes here and either end doesn't touch a vanishing point and it's not going straight up and down, then I'm making a mistake. It should always either be straight up and down or going to a vanishing point. Once I have my cube drawn in, I'm just going to make it darker so that it stands out. I don't like erasing all of my reference lines in these drawings because I feel like it's nice to see how I got where I am. There's evidence of that measurement that was made. If I was finishing this out into making it into another object. I might choose to erase these depending on what kind of drawing it is. But since this is just a perspective study, I have no reason to erase anything. And my last line here. There we go. I have a cube and 2-point perspective. These lines, any edge moving away from me this way is going to that vanishing point. Any edge moving away from me this way is going to this vanishing point here. Now, these vanishing points are pretty close together. In reality, they're going to be much farther apart. If I'm a person and I'm standing right here and this cube is a building, these vanishing points where I am looking are going to be 45-degree angles from one another. 45 degrees, which makes sense. If I'm standing at a corner of a building, this there towards compared to this here, this is a 45-degree corner, right? So these vanishing points are a 45-degree angle from one another. So that means if you have a vanishing point right on the middle of your page, your other vanishing point is straight to your right and straight to your left. Those are your other two vanishing points. Here, if I have a vanishing point here, this other vanishing point should be farther over to make it more accurate. The closer together your vanishing points get, the weirder your drawings are going to look. It's going to warp your perspective. They're going to look more like fisheye lens drawings, which is okay. If you want to have that kind of warped fisheye look, then bring your vanishing points together. That's okay. But if you want it to kind of look natural, the way objects look in real life, keep your vanishing points really far apart from one another. So I can do another cube. Let's stick one up here. If I do something above the horizon, everything's going to be exactly the same, but reversed. So I'm going to start with 4 lines. Let's move this, make this cube farther over this way. So I have my what's the bottom of the cube here. So it's the same as this, but flipped. It's upside down. So I'm now seeing the bottom. It's above the horizon, so I'm below it. So I can see that bottom. And bring a line straight up. From there, I can come back to these points. And there's my cube. So I drew this bottom, the same as I would the top, brought this line up. So this is that corner that's closest to me, brought this line up from that corner. And it doesn't matter really how far I bring it. From there, I'm bringing these lines back to my vanishing points and then using these corners here to find my outside edge of the cube. And again, I can make this darker so that it stands out. I can really see what that object is. Okay, so this cube shape is my most basic shape in perspective drawing. It's what I'm always going to start with. Even if I'm wanting a different form, a different object overall, if I can get it to fit into a cube, if I can figure out how it relates to a cube, that's always going to be better. So what I do want to do is look at what's going to happen if I have something that a cube that gets closer over to one of these vanishing points. So I'm going to draw another one over here. I'm not going to bring these lines all the way over to my vanishing point. I just need to make sure that they are going towards it. All right, so I have my top here. I can bring this straight down. All right, so as it comes over to the side, this side of the cube, I'm gonna start to lose that side of the cube. So you can see how that side here has gotten really, really thin, while this other side starts to get more square, almost square. So there we go. We have this cube that I'm seeing a lot of the front of it, I'm seeing a lot of the top of it, but I'm no longer seeing very much of this side. It's like a sliver of that side. If this came across my vanishing point, if I move this over this way to where it's the vanishing point is above it, it's going to start doing some really weird things. And it's going to mess me up. It's not going to look right. If you have a drawing that crosses your vanishing point and has multiple vanishing points, then you really get into an area that's harder to draw, because to do that you have to deal with how these objects should curve as they come here to start going up to that next vanishing point that's that way. And so you start to deal with these curved lines instead of straight lines, and we're not going to mess with curved lines because we're just not going to. If you're watching this video, you're probably not ready for that. So there we go. I'm not going to go any farther this way. I'm also going to deal with one cube that crosses my horizon. So this is something that is on the ground, but it's taller than me. So it's going above my line of sight. It's going above my eyeballs. So I won't see the bottom and I won't see the top. If I'm looking down on something, I can see the top. If I'm looking up at something, I can see the bottom. If I'm looking right at the corner of a building, I'm not going to see either. So for this, I'm going to start with this is where it starts, below the horizon, and the top of this building is right there above the horizon. I already have this top line drawn here because I drew it for this cube, so I'm just going to use that same line. But sometimes all of the lines in here can start to mess you up if you're not used to it. So sometimes it's good to draw new lines for yourself, or get a new sheet of paper if there's getting to be too many lines and you are getting a little lost in them. So the first thing that I did is I drew this corner that is closest to me. And then I'm taking this bottom corner, everything this way is going to that vanishing point, everything this way is going to the vanishing point over here. Oh, I already did that. Yeah. So I just have to decide, I'm going to have this building stop right here. This cube stop. I guess could be a building. And I'll have it stop right here. And there it is. cube-like building object. I can see the top. I cannot see the top. I cannot see the bottom. I see this corner that's closest to me, and then it going that way. Now, the closer this line gets to the horizon, you can see it starts to get to where it's almost flat. So this is, if this was the only thing I had drawn, it would be hard to recognize that object compared to these that are fairly simple. Now, I can draw as many things as I want into this drawing, and as long as I'm using these same two vanishing points, everything is going to make sense. It's going to be cohesive. It's going to look like it exists in the same space. Yeah. So the first thing that you should do if you're wanting to learn perspective drawing is draw these cubes, as many of them as you can. Once you get comfortable with them, then start playing with well, what happens if I have one of these cubes that's going behind the other? And do they need to be square? It could be more of a rectangle if I want. Well, and there you go. You have these. It's a very similar shape to this one. I just used the perspective lines that I already had drawn so that I didn't have to measure things again. And you can see how this has a nice relationship to this one. It's very uniform. It's like a space in between. I could put another one here and it'd be like almost like Morse code blocks going back. I could bring it back this way as well if I want. I can really play with this to see how I can fit all of these different geometric cubes into the same space using these 2 points. Now, like I said before, that 1 point perspective drawing that I did, that simple one, it's not really how things look. It's not the reality of it. And people who really have a good understanding of perspective would then look at this and say, hey, Doug, you have the same problem in this drawing as you did in that drawing, in that this 2 point perspective isn't really accurate either. It also doesn't quite exist in real life, because if I have this point and this point, if I measure halfway between them, which is going to be right here, about right here, if I measure halfway between them, I should have up here, going off the page, way up here somewhere, and down here, going off the page, a third and a fourth vanishing point. I should have a vanishing point down here. And what that will do is all of these lines that go straight up and down, if they're below the horizon, they would go to this vanishing point over here. If they're above the horizon, they'd go to this vanishing point up there. So in reality, an object, a cube, should have 3 vanishing points. And if it's above the horizon, it should have these 3. If it's below the horizon, it has these 2 and then one down here. So above these 2 and up here, below these 2 and down here. Something like this that crosses the horizon should have 4 vanishing points. So the part of it that goes below the horizon should go towards this vanishing point over here. The part of it that goes above the horizon should go to this vanishing point over here. So it's okay if that doesn't make any sense to you. That's fine. Drawings that use 4 vanishing points can get really complex And so we're not going to worry about them. We will talk some in the future about 3 vanishing points, 3-point perspective, but not today. So it's good to know that exists, but this usually is good enough. This usually is more than enough for what you need in your drawings. If you don't have these 2 vanishing points and get them right, that's where it's going to get really confusing, and it's going to look visually, it's going to look wrong. So be aware that 3-point perspective and 4-point perspective exist. You can have up to, I don't know, as many points as you want. It can get weird if you get above a certain amount, but usually you don't see anything much more than 4-point perspective. It's good to know those exist, but we're sticking with 2-point perspective for now. All right.